Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely. Always up for a good deep dive.
Well, today we're tackling a pretty serious topic, the sixth mass extinction.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We've been digging into this article, just called the sixth mass extinction, and wow, it's
Eye-opening.
yeah, eye-opening is a good word for it. Did you know that over 42,100 species are at risk right now?
It's a staggering number. It really hits you when you think about it. We're talking about potentially losing entire ecosystems.
It's like, if you think of life on Earth as this incredible book,
Right.
we're ripping out pages left and right. So today, we're going to really try to understand this, like how climate change is driving this extinction crisis and what it all means, for the planet, for us.
It's a complex issue for sure. I mean, we've had mass extinctions before in Earth's history.
Like the dinosaurs. Everyone knows about that one.
Exactly. But what's happening now is different. The extinction rate is just
A crazy high.
way higher. Hundreds, even thousands of times higher than the natural rate. And it's not a sudden event like an asteroid impact.
It's more like a slow burn.
Yeah, a slow burn. And we're the ones turning up the heat, so to speak.
The article says 1 in 4 species is threatened with extinction.
1 in 4. Just let that sink in for a moment.
And a big chunk of that is because of climate change.
It's a major factor, absolutely. And this is something I find really fascinating. It's not just a direct threat.
What do you mean?
Well, think of it like this. Climate change is a threat multiplier.
A threat multiplier. Okay, explain that one.
So it takes existing threats, things like habitat loss, pollution, overexploitation of resources.
Right.
And it makes them all worse, amplifies their impact.
So it's like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly, a perfect analogy. So
Yeah.
you've got these threats already stressing ecosystems, and then climate change comes along and throws gasoline on the whole thing.
Makes sense. So in the oceans, for example.
Climate change is the second biggest threat to marine life.
Second. Wow. And on land.
Fourth biggest. So we're talking about a global crisis here.
The article breaks down some of the specific ways climate change is messing things up, and honestly, some of this is pretty scary.
Yeah, some of the impacts are pretty alarming when you really dig into them.
Like habitat loss. That one seems pretty straightforward.
Right, it's pretty basic. A species needs a place to live, right?
Of course.
But as temperatures change, as weather patterns shift...
Habitats change too.
Exactly. Some species can adapt, they can move, but many can't. Take polar bears, for example.
Oh yeah, polar bears are like the poster child for climate change.
Right. Their whole world is sea ice.
But the ice is melting.
Melting fast, so they're losing their hunting grounds, their breeding grounds, their home, and it's not just polar bears.
No, I imagine lots of species are facing this problem.
Absolutely. Think about mountain species. As temperatures rise, they're forced to move higher and higher up the mountain.
But eventually they run out of mountain.
Exactly. There's nowhere left to go. And then you've got habitat fragmentation.
Oh yeah, the article mentioned that. What's that all about?
Imagine you're say a woodland creature, right? And you need to move to a cooler area because your forest is getting too warm.
Okay, I'm picturing a little squirrel.
Perfect. So our squirrel needs to move, but its path is blocked by roads, by farmland, by cities.
So even if there's suitable habitat somewhere else,
It can't get there. It's trapped.
that's pretty bleak.
It is. And then there are these things called phenological mismatches, which are a bit more complicated.
Yeah, that one kind of went over my head when I read it.
Think of it like nature's timing getting all out of whack.
Okay.
So many events in nature are timed based on temperature cues.
Like when plants bloom.
Exactly. Or when birds migrate or when insects emerge. But as temperatures change, those cues get messed up.
So things happen at the wrong time.
Right. Imagine a migratory bird arriving at its breeding grounds expecting a feast of insects.
Right.
But because of warmer temperatures, the insects peaked weeks earlier.
Oh, so the bird shows up and all the food is gone.
Exactly. And that can have cascading effects on the whole ecosystem.
Wow, so it's not just about the temperature itself, it's about the ripple effects on all these interconnected relationships.
Exactly. And then you add in things like ocean acidification.
Okay, another one I don't quite get. Ocean acidification. What is that?
Think of it like the ocean having a bad case of heartburn.
Heartburn.
Well, not literally, but it's a good analogy. You see, the ocean absorbs a lot of the carbon dioxide we release into the atmosphere.
Right, I know that. It's like a giant carbon sink.
Exactly. But when that CO2 dissolves in water, it forms carbonic acid.
Acid. So the ocean is getting more acidic.
Exactly. And that's a problem for a lot of marine creatures, especially those that build shells or skeletons.
Like corals.
Corals, shellfish, all sorts of things. They build their shells from calcium carbonate.
Right.
But in acidic water, that calcium carbonate dissolves.
Oh, wow. So it's like their shells are dissolving around them.
In a way, yeah. It makes them weaker, more vulnerable to predators and disease.
That's pretty messed up.
It is. And then, of course, you've got the increasing intensity and frequency of extreme weather events.
Oh, yeah. The droughts, the floods, the wildfires. It feels like those are happening more and more these days.
They are. And climate change is a major factor in that.
So imagine you're a species that's already struggling because of habitat loss or, whatever.
And then a hurricane rips through your ecosystem.
Or a wildfire wipes out your forest.
It can be devastating. It's like the final nail in the coffin.
So climate change is this underlying threat that's making everything else worse.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm of threats converging on biodiversity.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But it sounds like climate change isn't the only bad guy here.
Right. It's like I was saying earlier about it being a threat multiplier.
Right. So how does climate change interact with all these other problems? Like, give me a concrete example.
Okay, so let's go back to our squirrel friend trying to migrate to a cooler forest.
Okay, I'm with you.
Climate change is pushing it to move, but habitat fragmentation is blocking its path. Pollution weakens the squirrel's immune system, making it more susceptible to disease.
So it's like a 1-2-3 punch.
Exactly. It's this nasty combination of threats, all made worse by climate change.
This is all starting to feel a bit overwhelming, honestly. Is there any hope for turning things around?
There is. There's definitely hope. It's not, game over.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because, yeah, it's a lot. So where do we even start?
Well, the article talks about a bunch of different solutions, and it really emphasizes this idea of like a multi-pronged approach.
Multi-pronged, huh?
Yeah, like we need to be tackling this from all angles. Reducing emissions, obviously.
Right. Got to stop putting more fuel on that fire.
Exactly. But also protecting habitats, managing resources sustainably, addressing those other threats.
So it's not about finding one magic solution. It's
about using all the tools in the toolbox.
Makes sense. So what are some of those tools? Like the article mentions protected areas.
Yeah, protected areas are crucial. Think of them as like safe havens for nature, places where human impact is limited so species can thrive. National parks, wildlife refuges, marine sanctuaries, things like that.
Right. So basically setting aside land and ocean and saying hands off.
Exactly. But it's not enough to just create these isolated islands of protection. We also need to connect them.
Connect them? How do you do it?
With wildlife corridors. Think of them like ecological bridges.
Oh, right, like those wildlife crossings they build over highways.
That's a great example. So you've got these protected areas, and then you create corridors that allow animals to move between them.
So they're not trapped in one little spot.
Exactly. It helps with genetic diversity. It allows species to adapt to climate change.
Makes a lot of sense. The article also talks about something called sustainable practices, but that sounds kind of vague.
Yeah, it's a broad term for sure. But basically, it's about using resources in a way that doesn't deplete them for future generations.
Okay, so like not using up all the fish in the ocean.
Exactly. Sustainable fishing is a great example. Setting limits, using specific gear to avoid bycatch.
Bycatch.
That's when you accidentally catch other species that you're not targeting. So sustainable fishing tries to minimize that. And then you've got sustainable agriculture.
Oh, right, like organic farming?
That's part of it, yeah. But it's also about things like rotating crops, using cover crops to prevent soil erosion, integrating trees into farmland.
So it's about working with nature, not against it.
Exactly. And sustainable forestry is another big one, making sure we can harvest wood without destroying the forest.
It's like that whole reduce, reuse, recycle thing, but for like everything.
Yeah, it's about thinking long term, about making sure there are enough resources for everyone now and in the future. And of course, we can't talk about solutions without talking about energy.
Right. Fossil fuels are a huge part of the problem.
Absolutely. So transitioning to renewable energy is key. Solar, wind, geothermal.
Harnessing the power of nature, basically.
Exactly. And that, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some really cool things happening all over the world.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, tons of innovative projects, community-led initiatives, international agreements.
So people are actually working on this.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole global movement happening.
That makes me feel a little better. What about technology? I feel like that's got to play a role.
Definitely. Technology can be a huge help in conservation. For example, we can use satellites to monitor ecosystems from space.
Wow, from space?
Yeah. track deforestation, identify illegal fishing activity.
It's like having a bird's eye view of the planet.
Exactly. And artificial intelligence can help us analyze all that data, spot patterns, predict future trends.
So we can make smarter decisions.
Exactly. We're also seeing innovations in gene editing and biotechnology that could be really helpful.
Like bringing back extinct species.
Yeah, that's a possibility. But it raises some ethical questions for sure.
Yeah, like, is it really a good idea to bring back a species if its habitat is gone? Or what are the unintended consequences of introducing something back into an ecosystem? It's kind of like opening Pandora's box, right?
Right.
Like, we have the power to do it, but should we?
Exactly. It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do. We need to think carefully about the ethical implications of these technologies.
Well, it's definitely something to keep in mind as technology keeps advancing. But it is cool to see how it can help us protect biodiversity.
Oh, absolutely. And, even without all the fancy tech, there's a lot we can do as individuals.
Yeah, like what can regular people actually do to help?
Well, for starters, be mindful of your consumer choices.
Okay.
Like when you're grocery shopping, look for sustainably sourced products.
Right, like organic produce and stuff.
Exactly. Fair trade coffee, sustainably harvested seafood.
So basically, supporting businesses that are doing things the right way. Voting with our wallets.
Exactly. And reducing your carbon footprint is huge. Walk, bike, take public transport whenever possible.
Cut down on energy use at home, all that good stuff.
Yeah, all those little things add up. And don't underestimate the power of getting involved in your community. Volunteer with a local conservation group, plant some trees, clean up a beach.
Or just talk to people about this stuff. Spread the word.
Exactly. Education is key. The more people understand the biodiversity crisis, the more likely we are to find solutions.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here. The sixth mass extinction, the causes, the impacts.
The challenges, the solutions.
Yeah, it's complex for sure. But it's also, it's not hopeless.
Definitely not. We have the knowledge, we have the tools.
We just need to use them.
Exactly. And that's where individual action comes in. Every little bit helps.
So, to our listeners out there, what will you do to protect biodiversity? What step will you take today? Think about it. It's up to all of us to make a difference.
Absolutely. The future of life on Earth depends on it.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.